Okay, hi everyone, welcome. I hope you can all hear me okay. My name is Roisin Garvey. I'm in the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning, and the session today is looking at designing digital content for all. But what we're looking at in this session is some of the common accessibility issues that we come across and how to improve them. And what I want to cover in this session is looking at creating new content, new digital content, and considering the accessibility issues, but also how we might approach improving the digital content that we already have. So any existing content that we have. Um, so after this session, I'm going to send out the slide deck. I'll send out the recording of it as well. If you have any questions, there's the chat feature. There's also the Q&A if you'd like to pop them in there, and I'll try to address them during the session. And if not, I'll do it afterwards. And you can also, of course, email us at edtech@mtu.ie, or myself, roisin.garvey@mtu.ie. And I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm just going to get started kind of straight away on this just because they're short sessions. I got distracted there because I just realized I misspelled the slide deck. Um okay, so what um what do we mean by designing digital content for all, and why are we doing it? So whether you're lecturing staff, whether you're admin staff, we have to account for the diversity in our audience. So we need to make sure that our content is accessible for individuals with disabilities, older adults, non-native speakers, those with different educational or cultural backgrounds, individuals with short-term injuries or illnesses. The list is so broad. So we really need to make sure that our content is accessible as possible. So what does this mean for teaching and learning environments? We could come across people that have issues in actually accessing information. So that might be that an individual might have a visual impairment or low vision. They might have a hearing impairment. And so we need to make sure that they can actually access the information itself. We could have individuals who have difficulties with comprehension or information processing. So we need to make considerations for this when we're presenting our content, whether it's in a Word document or whether it's on Canvas or whether we're putting up content on OneDrive or anything like that for our colleagues. We need to kind of consider all of these bits of information as well. We could have people who have poor time management or organizational skills. So there's some kind of tips that I can give as well for um, if you're using Canvas for this as well. Sending reminders, really kind of outlining information and everything like that. Um, we could have people with difficulties in focusing or understanding linkages. So this is another key one for lectures as well. We could have students who find it difficult to link an assignment to the learning outcomes or things like that, or they might not be able to find a linkage between content within an online session or content within a session and say the assignment itself or anything. We could have people with poor retention and recall, and then issues with time-bound assessments. So this is another big one as well. My colleague Sarah, I think, is going to do a VVOC session as part of this kind of these training weeks, which is a really, really great tool for kind of engagement and everything like that. I know that in the past there have been a lot of people using things like Kahoot and stuff like that, which are great engagement tools where you can add a timer to it, which sounds fantastic for people, and it really kind of gives an element of fun and everything like that. But for some individuals, it might be quite stressful, something that you don't intend to be stressful at all. So there's kind of considerations around that as well. Um, So that's the important reason why we need to create accessible content. Another reason is that there is a legal requirement now since 2020 to have accessible digital content. So when we talk about digital accessibility, we're talking about ensuring that our, digital content or websites or apps or anything like that are as usable and as accessible as possible for everybody, regardless of their abilities. Um, so this content is, sorry, this legislation is based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA, which is the standard for accessible digital content on the web, and that should be at a minimum, so that we try to kind of adhere to the guidelines 2.1 AA as at a minimum. But we will try to kind of maybe go a bit further than that. Uh, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines were created by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and they have within the guidelines that your content should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And one of the reasons that this is really important as well is, sorry, and I'll go through those in a second, but one of the reasons that this is really important is the legislation is related to the public sector. So anywhere that we have content for public consumption, so that's on the MTU website, but it also includes Canvas, WorkVivo, even though they're behind the credentialing, they're behind IDP, we still need to have those be as accessible as possible. What the legislation did as well is it put the onus on the public institute to create the accessible content rather than having somebody, put it on somebody to say, look, your content isn't accessible. So we need to be doing that on our side. So what we're going to do in the session is look at the basics of improving digital accessibility of files and media. I'm going to offer some tips for managing and improving accessibility of existing content, and we'll look at some digital accessibility tools and resources, so including UDOIT in Canvas. So I know that there are some staff on this session who may not be lecturing with Canvas, but I'll go through the accessibility tools in Word and PowerPoint as well. And if it is something that you're interested in looking more at with UDOIT in Canvas, I'm more than happy to set up a sandbox area for you if you'd like to have a look at it. If you'd like to upload some documents and kind of run a scan on it, that's no bother. So you can let me know if you're interested in that. So I mentioned POUR and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of those. So the P in POUR stands for perceivable. So what we need to do is to ensure that the material and the interface, so Canvas, SharePoint, anything like that, can be perceived by all users. So we need to present content in an alternative manner where possible. So the big thing here, or the more obvious one here, would be if you have a video that you include captions, that you might be able to include a transcript, that you would have alt text or alternative text for any images or charts or tables or anything like that. Um, from a kind of an app or a kind of an infrastructure point of view, it's looking at being able to kind of resize text or change the contrast and things like that. And you'll often find that within a lot of the tools that we use, like Canvas or Microsoft Suite is fantastic for accessibility. There are those options to make those changes as well. In terms of operable, what we're looking at is things like being able to navigate a course or navigate an environment, without a mouse. Maybe you have a keyboard, maybe you have assistive technology. The screenshot I have there is just being able to kind of navigate with your keyboard through Canvas and kind of get to the different items and the different menu items and everything like that. That it's understandable. so that the content and the use of the interface itself is understandable. So what we're talking about here is using plain language, which I know is can be difficult in certain subjects as well, where you might have a lot of complicated terminology or anything like that. Um, that if you look at having a predictable and consistent navigation, and it also relates as well to things like providing timely feedback and providing kind of more guidance as well around a system that you're trying to kind of make the whole environment as understandable as possible. The final item there, robust. So this is looking a lot at kind of the technical infrastructure from the perspective of kind of making sure that it's usable by people with different devices or assistive technologies or on different platforms. So something like even looking at being able to access something on a browser or a mobile device. But the other thing here as well is making sure that you keep your apps and everything like that, your browsers, that you keep them updated because there's constant updates to the accessibility of the different programs and the different apps and everything like that. So if you can keep them updated, you're kind of helping to improve the usability and the accessibility of all of these systems. The problem with that and with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which I have in a screenshot here, so this is from the W3C website, is that it's quite difficult to kind of understand a lot of them, but it's also quite difficult to remember what we need to be looking at when we are creating our accessible content. Um, so what I'm going to do in this session is kind of go through some of the most common accessibility issues as they kind of relate to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and also some tips on how you might make this content a little bit more accessible yourself, so that you're able to kind of remember what you need to be looking at when you're doing your accessible checks. So in this section now, I'm just going to look at those common accessibility issues and just give you a bit of an explanation of them and maybe how you can address them. So what I'll do is I'll jump across to Word and I'll jump across to Canvas as well for some of these. But as I said, I'll be sending you the slide deck of these afterwards as well and some of the links to them. The first poster I'm going to show you is kind of has an easy to remember mnemonic for how to kind of remember those key common accessibility issues. If you even are able to address these ones, you're going a long way in terms of kind of making your content accessible. So the sculpt one I find quite good. It looks at making sure that your structure is accessible. So that's kind of using headings and things like that to structure your document. That you've looked at the color and the color contrast. That you've looked at your images and any links that you've used. That you're using plain English or plain language. It should be really that it's uncomplicated. And that you look at how you're using tables as well within your content itself. So that can be quite a handy one, and I'll send you a link to that separately as well. The other one that I find quite good is the Thrives one. So that's from Queen's University Belfast. And the reason that this one is quite good as well is it also includes recordings, and it looks at it brings in the element of using the accessibility checkers and using the tools that are available to you. So you've the similar ones that we just saw in Sculpt. You've got your tables, you've got your links. It also mentions inclusive fonts. Your visuals there would be your imagery, your structure as well, and then like that examine is your accessibility checkers. So either of those would be handy, but like that. Once you kind of once you kind of get started with it, you'll start to remember them. But for the moment, like these are handy checklists f for you. The first one I'm going to look at here is structure. So the example I have here is if you're creating a Word document, the best thing you can do in Word is or in Google Docs or whatever you're using. The reason I'm mentioning kind of some of the software is because we have it here in MTU. But if you use the styles within Word itself to structure your document, so if you have the heading styles, if you use the bullets, the bullet formatting within Word as well, if you're if you're one of the big things with the headings actually is that you don't skip the levels of them, so that you don't go from say heading one to heading three. Sometimes we have a tendency to do that if the built-in style looks better, but it is you are able to kind of update these, and it just makes it more logical, the sequence of information as you go through it. Um, One nice way of checking this is to use the navigation panel within Word. That can be really helpful to be able to show how how you're kind of structuring it. But it just makes the content easier to digest, easier to understand for people. I'm just going to jump over quickly into Word, if you'll just excuse all my apps that I have open. Um, so here's just a Word document where I have some of the content from this slide deck as well. And over here is my navigation panel, which shows because I'm using the formatting here, because I'm using the heading styles, it's shown me at the kind of the structure already of my document. So for instance, if I come down here and I highlight this and I set it as, I think that's heading two, it starts to show up and my structure of my document starts to become clearer here on the left-hand pane. If you're looking to open this yourselves, if you go into View, now this is on a Mac as well, so it might be slightly different, but your navigation pane is what you're looking for here. By default, it probably opens up in a more visual format. But if you click here on this kind of the document map, it'll show you the information here. And it also makes it easier for you to navigate the document yourself if you want to jump to the particular areas. It'll kind of pop around there. So if I want to add another one here, I can go back and just click here into my heading two. Um, so if I want to as well, when I've finished my document, what I can do is go up to the tools and check accessibility. And what that will do is it'll show me all of the kind of the items that Word by default will be looking for in terms of accessibility. And if there's any issues, like I'm missing alt text for the item up here, I can click on this and it'll allow me to update the alt text. So I'll jump back to my PowerPoint there for a second, and we'll come back to this then. Another important one here is color contrast. So what we want to ensure is that there's sufficient contrast between the text and the background colors. So any of the kind of information that we want to kind of show in our documents or in our PowerPoints or anything like that. Um, One of the things to consider as well is if even if you don't have text on the color itself, that you don't have incredibly bright colors or things like that that might be a little jarring as well for people. Um, so one way to check the color contrast is to use there's online tools that use it. You also have apps. This one here in the screenshot is the color contrast checker, which I'm actually going to open up here. So it's a color contrast analyzer. And what that lets me do is use this dropper tool if I want, and that'll let me kind of pick the color from the page or anything like that. So if I want to even just choose that color that I have, the foreground color is whatever is in front. So that would be the text in this instance. And then if I go down here under the background color, I can do the same and I can say choose white. And it'll tell me down here then if this passes the color contrast requirements. So in terms of Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, We have the AA result here. So in terms of legislation, this would pass. But if I want to go the step further, I can make sure that this passes as well here, the regular text. What we mean by regular text is like your normal text that you'd have on the document, like usually a minimum of about 12 points. And then your large text would be things like your headings or anything like that. If I want to up here as well, so I can either pick the color, or I can use these bars here to kind of change it. You'll see my contrast ratio has changed here. It should be kind of minimum 4.5 to 1. And you'll see that I'm after updating that there. So I can take that color and I can paste it wherever I want. So this was something I downloaded, this color contrast analyzer, but there are also ones available in browsers or anything like that that you could use. It can be a little overwhelming again to kind of go back and do this for existing content. But one thing that you could do is maybe create a bit of a kind of a sort of a brand identity for yourself. So you might say want to use the MTU colors for kind of your presentations, but try to kind of maybe have a look at what colors work well together. Maybe there might be um, maybe there might be colors that work well or that you'd use a lot for your subject matter, we'll say. But you could kind of maybe have a few colors that you know work together and you'll be able to kind of use those within your slide decks or anything. Another thing to consider here as well is avoid using color as the only way to highlight content. So you might have you'd see it often where people would have something highlighted in kind of red font or something. Um, but what you need to consider here is people who might be using a screen reader to, say, read out the information that's on a page. You might have somebody who has a visual impairment or low vision, and this isn't the best way for them to kind of see that this is important information. So while you can highlight something in red if you want. You should also have some other way to highlight that this is important information. So whether it's bolding the information as well, or just literally putting in the text important. Another test that you can do here to make sure that you're not relying on color alone to highlight something is to view it in grayscale or print it out if it's a short document that don't want to waste paper or anything like that. But if you want to check it in grayscale, if the content makes sense when you're not relying on color, then you're kind of okay to you should be okay to go with that. The next common issue, and you've probably heard of this one as well before yourselves, is providing alternative text for images or graphs, or kind of any kind of graphics within a document itself. Um, it's something that I will admit it can be quite annoying to do, particularly if you have a lot of images, trying to, you're already after writing your document. Now you have to go and think of how to describe an image. But it's so important to describe images. What I will say as well, though, is try not to stress about it too much. Um, try to just d describe the image itself. You don't need to put in anything like image of, because if somebody is using a screen reader, it will already read out that information, but then it'll follow up then with whatever description that you have in it. Um, there are AI tools to do it now. There's some quite powerful tools that will automatically generate your alternative text. Word and PowerPoint and everything, they also provide an auto-generated description for images. What I will say though is do please review it and add context if necessary, because a lot of these auto-generated descriptions remove, like they don't have the context within the description at all. So for instance, you might have the same image and that you use maybe in a document and you might use it in your PowerPoint as well, but you might use it for two completely different reasons. So you might have an image of students doing group work. They're standing around a table. You might be using it to show, um, you know, just students at work in one context, and then you might be using it to demonstrate what they're actually doing. They might have paper in front of them or anything like that. So that might be used in a different context. So do try to include that information in it as well. I did have somebody mention before about somebody using images as a kind of a joke in a presentation, but there was no context added, there was no alt text added. So the people that were following along, um, who couldn't see the image, they just completely missed the joke as well. So the context is important. So do please try to add that if possible. The other thing though that's important about images is if the image isn't important, if it doesn't add any value to the content, if it's just there purely for aesthetic reasons, you can mark it as decorative so that it's not important. What you're saying to somebody using a screen reader is that they can skip over this. This is also important if an image doesn't load on a website, that you're not scrambling to try and see if this is an important image that you need to be aware of. So an example of a decorative image here on this slide would be this graphic underneath the title, or even this line down here. These are decorative. It doesn't matter if you don't see them or anything like that. You don't need that read out to you that there is a line, there's a blue line under here or a purple line at the bottom. Um, the other thing as well, in terms of providing alternate information for media for our images, is to try to include closed captions for video content. So that would be in this screenshot here, we've a still image of a video of President Maggie Cusack, and she's doing the update to staff. So the captions are included there, but it's also possible to provide a transcript as well, which would just have the full text of the video. So if you can't play the video, say if you're in a noisy environment, say if you're in a quiet environment, you can just read the transcript and you don't have to play the video itself. For existing content, if you have a script for the video that you shot, that's fantastic. You can upload that as a caption file. You can upload it as a transcript. So there's probably tons of videos that you have that don't have any of this information. But I found somebody asked me about this before Christmas, so I was having a look at kind of what is the best way to generate captions or generate transcripts. So again, there's AI tools that will do this for you. Some people are comfortable with that, some people aren't. Most of the tools that you would be using, regardless of what software you're using, would be kind of based on some bit of AI. So what I found is quite good is if you actually upload your video to OneDrive, and I'll jump over here to show you this if I can find it. Um, so here's a video that I have updated or I've uploaded to OneDrive. Now, this was something that I recorded in Zoom, so it did actually have captions available with it, and it had a transcript as well. But if I had this just on my desktop and there was no information with it, I can go into the video settings here and click on transcript and captions, and I can generate the transcript for it. I find it quite good here in the Microsoft. Microsoft is very good for accessibility anyway. It does take a while to generate, but one thing I will say is just come in after and review it and edit it, um, and just to kind of uh, improve it a bit afterwards. You There's one tool that I was using where it just had all my ums and ahs and everything like that. So, but some of them actually do remove that for you, which is very gracious. The other thing that one of my colleagues, Ruth, will be going through as well is Canvas Studio. which is a new integration we have in Canvas, and that also will automatically generate captions for you as well. Again, like with the alt text, if you are using something that'll automatically do it, do please review it afterwards. Another thing I mentioned there as well was at the start of this session was plain language. So ensuring that your text is written in clear, simple language. Um, Avoid unnecessary jargon or unexplained terms. So this is something that's quite key as well. If you are teaching particular subjects where you can't avoid using specific complicated terminology, perhaps consider using a glossary. It could be something, especially if you're teaching these terms across a few different subjects, or if you're teaching this year to year, even a Word document with just the explanation of these terms can be really useful for students, just as a bit of a reminder as they go through the content as well. But just trying to write as clear as possible if you're communicating with students um, through Canvas on announcements or emails or anything like that. We do tend to be a little bit more formal on emails sometimes, but just try to keep things clear, use bullet points, maybe link to the information that you're talking about as well. All of these can be really helpful. Links as well is another one. I'm just kind of conscious of time. This will go to about 20 to but like that if anybody has to leave, I'll be sending out the recording afterwards. Links are another one as well. So trying to attach meaningful text to the links, just making it easier to read. Again, I'm going to mention screen readers here. If you have somebody who's relying on a screen reader to read out the information for you, they will read every letter of a link. So it can just be very confusing and it can be hard to kind of follow. So, a lot of most of the tools out there, Canvas, Word, PowerPoint, they allow you to edit the link text. So it's the text that's visible to people. It can also be a tip here that can be useful for trying to check if your link has meaningful description is to take the links from your document and maybe pop them at the bottom or just consider them out of context. Would they still make sense if they weren't within the sentence itself? So what we're thinking here is trying to avoid having a link that the title or the text of it is click here or something, that you just have that bit more meaningful text on it. The final thing here in this section is just looking at your digital environment. So that's if that's your Canvas homepage, maybe it's, maybe it's a microsite that you're keeping updated. Maybe it's just, SharePoint or Teams or anything like that that you are um, adding content to. A homepage on Canvas can be really useful to try and kind of guide users and manage expectations. Things like, here's where I'm going to be adding content. Here's how I'm going to be communicating with you, bits and pieces like that. And try to remove any redundant links from the navigation or from content. So, you know, we all kind of copy content from one year to another on Canvas, but maybe just have a review of it to see that you haven't kind of decided to leave out links, that you still have the links in there, but the content isn't there or anything. So just have a review of it if you are using that. Um, I just have a short bit there about kind of accessibility options during live sessions and for recordings. So I mentioned a few things there in as I was going through those in terms of the media. Um, I'm talking about Zoom specifically here for this because a lot of people use it for teaching and learning here. But there are a lot of these features are kind of available in other video conferencing platforms. So captions, it's possible to enable closed captions for live sessions, um, can be really useful for people with visual issues. It could be for extremely useful for non-native speakers. The other option here as well. So this is for Zoom. It's possible to generate a transcript of your session. Again, you will need to review it and kind of edit it and update it. but it can be really really useful afterwards to just have the text of the actual session as well. Another option here as well is recording highlights. So that allows you to kind of mark important points or kind of create chapters within your content. So say if you've a long recorded class, you can kind of mark out the different kind of highlighted options. I will say though that those two tools they do use AI, Zoom's AI feature again, just to be aware of. Some people might not be comfortable with that. Those are also opt-in features. The other thing you can do in Zoom as well is you can provide an audio-only recording, which can be quite useful. It's just an alternative format for your class that you have. Some people find it useful to pop it on like a podcast, if they're going for a walk, if they're in the car, if they're on the bus. So that can be a handy one as well. And again, it's auto-generated. It's something that you can just click a setting and it'll pop out just the audio. Where to start? What I'm looking at here is specifically existing content that you might have. I know I kind of touched on it as I was going through that, uh, all of those kind of points there, but it's very overwhelming to kind of look at all of the content that we have digitally and see how can I go back and improve on that. So what I have here is just a few options maybe of what might be useful if you want to get started on kind of improving the accessibility of existing content that you might have. So one option is to choose one category or issue to focus on. So maybe you want to look back and update the alt text for your documents. Maybe it's a case of starting with kind of one category. So going back and just marking the sort of the unimportant images as decorative. Maybe you want to tackle adding alt text to the simple images. Again, you don't need to kind of overthink it too much. You are going to improve it if you add kind of any bit of description to your images themselves. So just remember that as well. The other thing you could do is maybe go back and check links in your documents, add link descriptions. If you're using Canvas, it's possible to kind of run a tool which checks for broken links. So that can be really useful as well. It's just a click of a button and it'll show up a report of all the links that might not be accessible to your students. And then you can kind of go and update those. Another option that you could do is to add captions and transcripts to your videos. If you want to use the transcription software, if you want to upload it to OneDrive, like I was showing there, if you want to add it to YouTube and use the auto-generated feature there, or Canvas Studio, which, as I mentioned, Ruth will be going through in a session. I think it's next week. So you have a few options there for maybe what to tackle, or just choose one category and kind of go back and try and make the improvements there. For anybody who's done any UDL training, it's like the plus one thought. Just go and try to make just maybe one update. Um, Use the built-in accessibility checkers in commonly used software. So that's Microsoft Word, which I was showing you. PowerPoint has it as well. I'm in PowerPoint here. This is why I kind of kept in the edit mode. Because if I go to tools here, I can click on check accessibility there and it'll show warnings and items here. The one thing that I haven't updated yet for this particular slide deck is the reading order because I wanted to show the different options there. But what you're looking at doing is making sure that if somebody is accessing this using assistive technology or a screen reader, that the order that things will be read out to them will be the correct order, that it's the correct reading order throughout the document. If you've any issues in terms of like no alt text, they'll show up here, and you'll be able to, with a lot of these tools, you're able to make the updates within the interface itself, which is really useful so that you can kind of stay on track as you're kind of progressing through it, and it kind of marks it as resolved and ticks it off the list as you go through. So that's a feature in quite a lot of things. Adobe PDF is another one. You might have heard that PDF is not accessible. It's not entirely true. It's not the most accessible. But if you are trying to create an accessible PDF, you really need to have an accessible, like say, Word document first, then save it as a PDF, run your accessibility checker in Adobe as well, and then you're kind of a lot of that has kind of improved the accessibility of it. So a lot of us have a huge amount of PDF documents because it tended to be the one that showed up better on digitally, on Canvas and things like that, or people had a concern that people could edit the Word document if that was up there. So we do tend to have a lot of PDFs. Um, but fear not, it just do try to kind of make those improvements and run the accessibility checker on them. The other thing as well then is getting started with UDOIT. Now, what I'm going to do is a separate session on UDOIT because there is a lot to cover with it. But I'm just going to jump over very quickly if people have time. Um, so UDOIT is an accessibility checker within Canvas. It runs, it does a scan of your entire module. So rather than going into the individual pages and kind of checking the accessibility report there, it'll run it across your entire module. And it'll also let you filter the results. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly jump over to that if I can find where I was here. So it's available within your Canvas module. It's under the heading accessibility. If you can't see it in your menu item, you just need to add it in your navigation. But what it does is it'll scan your whole module. I did a scan earlier, so I'm going to skip that aspect there. It does it quite quickly. And if you click on you fix it, what it does is it shows you errors and suggestions for fixes. This 288 errors is probably quite common for people. So, but I do understand how overwhelming it can seem. But they do have a really nice filtering system here where if I click on the filter here, what I can do is I can choose to concentrate on a particular content type. So I can look at say, okay, I'm just going to update, improve the accessibility of my announcements or my pages. What you can also do, sorry, I scroll down there quickly. You can also filter by issue impact. The reason that this might be quite useful is if you have a student or if you have a colleague who comes and says, look, I have a visual issue, I have, motor issues, you can come in and prioritize those to fix those issues. So the issues that are most that will have most impact on somebody with visual issues. So you can filter by those. You can also filter by active or fixed or resolved issues. So it can be quite useful as you go through your content to see how you're progressing. By issue severity, so anything that's an error, that's a kind of a more kind of serious issue, or would have more of an impact on people, or things that would be a suggested improvement. But another nice addition that they have here recently is to be able to hide unpublished content or hide unused content. And unused content, if I just roll over the information item here, it's content that UDOIT considers content not found in your units or linked to by other content. So that's what they consider unused. So this is particularly useful if you're copying content from one year to another. You might not be using all of it. Maybe you're not using all of it straight away. So this might help you to kind of chunk the updates as you go through. And you can also show a filter by the easiest issues to fix. These tend to be the ones where you can fix it within the interface, like adding alt text. So you add your alt text and you click next. Um, or you can kind of pick an issue from the drop-down menu here. And if I click on this item here, it'll show up the error issue, and it'll kind of explain it a small bit, and it'll also let you fix it for some of the issues within the interface itself. So here is one of the issues that we went through, which is avoid using color alone for emphasis. So what I can do is I can use, like, these are suggested updates that I can make. So I can also make this text bold. I can also italicize it, or I can remove the color completely. So if I click on that, it'll show how it updates. And maybe I just want to make it bold as well, and that's updated there. I can mark it as resolved and I can move on. Um, that was a really quick kind of view of UDOIT, but as I said, I'll be doing like a dedicated session on UDOIT as well, for academic staff or anybody who wants to maybe have a look at UDOIT. As I said, I'm happy to make create a sandbox in Canvas for you on that. I'm kind of conscious of the time as well. If anybody has any questions, do please free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A, or do please follow up with me afterwards. We have some articles on digital accessibility and just on using the digital tools here in MTU on our help desk. We also have a ticketing system. So if you want to contact us at edtech@mtu.ie, or as I said, if you want to reach out to me directly on it, I'd be happy to have a look at any questions or any issues that you might be having. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry that we went over. There's a huge amount to cover, but I hope it was helpful. I hope that there were some kind of practical tips that might make improving the accessibility a little less overwhelming for you. Um, Thanks so much.